The meeting room smelled like fear and cheap coffee, a scent combination that made one wonder if decisions made here were birthed from sensible deliberation or a caffeine-induced panic. Commander Lysander Mord slouched in his chair, daring the universe to give him a reason to care more than he already didn't. The Interstellar Council chamber was a muggy blend of alien species and human representatives, each more self-important than the last. The topic du jour, Xylaria, a planet with more personality than Mord's ex-wife. It had the irritating habit of assimilating nearby worlds, like a cosmic vacuum cleaner with a vendetta. Cute, right? We must consider a non-aggressive approach, droned Ambassador Thalker, a gelatinous mass that, when the light hit it right, looked like an oil spill with aspirations. A non-aggressive approach, Mord echoed, rolling his eyes. Why don't we just send it a bouquet and a please stop card? Laughter stirred around the table, a mix of nervous titters and genuine amusement. Mord had a knack for this, making even the end of the universe sound like a punchline. Some appreciated it, others, like Thalker, found it insufferable. Thalker's form quivered with what could only be described as irritation. Commander Mord, this is a serious matter. Xylaria poses an existential threat. Existential threats are kind of our thing, Mord replied with a shrug. Humans have been surviving those since we crawled out of the sludge. Indeed, interjected Dr. Zinnia Vex, a human scientist whose mind was as sharp as her tongue. We're uniquely qualified for reckless survival. We've got adaptability in spades. The room hummed with the usual tension that accompanied any discussion about humanity's role in the galaxy. Some species respected humans for their resilience, others barely tolerated them, like an annoying younger sibling who occasionally saved the day. What makes you think adaptability will save your species this time, Commander? Queried High Counselor Xylar, an insectoid with eyes that seemed to dissect your soul. Because we're too stupid to know when to quit, Mord replied, a grin spreading across his face. And sometimes that's all it takes. Xylar's antennae twitched, a gesture that could have meant annoyance or amusement. With bugs, it was hard to tell. Mord leaned forward, the faux leather of his chair squeaking in protest. Look, Xylaria's a big problem, but it's also a planet. Planets don't move fast and neither does bureaucracy, so we've got time. Time we cannot afford to waste, Xylar countered. Oh please, Mord scoffed. If time wasn't meant to be wasted, why did they invent committee meetings? Dr. Vex stifled a chuckle, earning a glare from Xylar and a wink from Mord. The banter was a thin shield against the crushing weight of their predicament. The truth was, if Xylaria kept its course, business as usual wouldn't cut it. I'm not saying we ignore the threat, Mord continued, growing uncharacteristically serious. But humans have a way of turning a crisis into an opportunity. Is that what you call it? Thalker huffed. Many would say it's merely chaos with good PR. Call it what you want, Mord said, shrugging. But it works. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. There was a certain logic to Mord's madness, a truth hidden within his irreverence. Humanity's unpredictable nature was simultaneously their greatest asset and their most significant risk. So what's the plan, Commander? Asked Vex, cutting through the silence like a laser through butter. Mord scratched his chin, eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. We do what we do best, improvise. Improvise, Xylar repeated, mandibles clicking together in disbelief. Sure, Mord said, leaning back with an air of confidence that bordered on reckless. It's not like we have a manual for dealing with sentient planets. That's your solution. Thalker's voice dripped with incredulity like an overripe fruit ready to burst. Improvise, worked for jazz music, Mord quipped. And war, Vex added helpfully. Also nuclear disasters. There's precedent, Mord grinned. Silence followed, the kind that hung heavy and oppressive, like an uninvited relative during the holidays. The council members exchanged looks, contemplating the line between genius and insanity, a line Mord liked to tap dance across with glee. All right, Xylar finally conceded. We proceed with improvisation. A reluctant consensus was reached. The meeting adjourned, leaving Mord and Vex alone in the chamber, lingering like the smell of bad decisions. "You really think we can improvise our way out of this?" Vex asked, her voice a curious blend of skepticism and hope. Mord stood, stretching with a yawn that belied the gravity of their situation. "I don't know, Vex. But I do know that sitting around expecting some miracle strategy to drop from the sky ain't gonna cut it." "You're right," Vex admitted, though her expression suggested it pained her to do so. "But this is a whole new level of crazy even for us." "That's the spirit," Mord laughed, clapping her on the shoulder. "Welcome to the crazy." They walked out together, two humans against the universe, armed with nothing but wit, audacity, and a plan that barely qualified as one. As the chamber doors slid shut behind them, Mord felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. It was the kind of fear that came with stepping into the unknown, the kind that made his heart beat just a little faster. "I hope you're right about this," Vex murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the corridor. Mord shrugged, a devil-may-care grin plastered across his face. "Me too, but if we're wrong, at least we'll go down swinging." Vex snorted, unable to suppress her amusement. "You always know how to make impending doom sound like a weekend getaway." "It's a gift," Mord replied as they headed towards the docking bay. The corridors were crowded, a bustling testament to life going on, oblivious to the silence of space just beyond the hull. People were arguing over coffee beans, pilots were exchanging stories about their latest close calls, and custodians were complaining about the mess. It was the kind of chaos that made Mord feel at home. "Think the others will go along with your plan?" Vex asked as they ducked around a particularly heated exchange between two maintenance workers over whose wrench was whose. "Who knows?" Mord replied, dodging a flailing spanner. "And honestly, who cares?" "You do," Vex stated flatly. "You care just enough to make sure they follow through." "Maybe," Mord admitted, his voice low and conspiratorial. "But let's keep that between us, okay? I've got a reputation to maintain." Vex nodded, lips quirked in a half-smile. "Of course, Commander. Wouldn't want anyone thinking you were secretly competent." "Perish the thought," Mord chuckled as they reached the docking bay. The doors slid open, revealing a cacophony of noise and activity. Ships, glistening and grimy alike, were being prepped for whatever missions awaited. Engineers shouted over the clatter, their voices a symphony of urgency. Mord and Vex made their way to their ship, a battered piece of human engineering named the Reckless Dreamer, a fitting name for a crew that thrived on the edge. "Home sweet home," Mord said, waving a hand at the ship's rusted hull. "Still standing somehow." "I suspect it's as stubborn as its captain," Vex replied, boarding the ship. The interior was a tight squeeze, a mishmash of upgrades and patchwork repairs. It had character, much like its crew. Mord settled into the captain's seat, the worn leather fitting him like an old glove. "All right, Vex," he said as the ship hummed to life. "Let's see how much trouble we can get into." "Trouble, us?" Vex smirked, taking her place at the console. "I thought we were on a mission to save the galaxy." "Same difference," Mord grinned, hitting the controls. The ship lifted off with a shudder and a groan, climbing through the atmosphere and into the void beyond. Stars blinked into focus, distant and indifferent as they set course for Xylaria. "Think they'll remember this day?" Vex asked as the stars streaked past. "They might," Mord replied, voice thoughtful for once. "But if not, we'll make damn sure they remember tomorrow." With a shared glance of camaraderie, they plunged into the unknown, the reckless dreamer spinning against the vast, uncaring expanse. As the reckless dreamer hurtled through space, Lysander Mord was busy trying to make sense of a universe that seemed hell-bent on snuffing out humanity like a bad joke. His ship's console flickered, casting an eerie glow over the cockpit. "You ever think the universe has a sick sense of humor?" he asked, more to himself than to Dr. Zinnia Vex, who was busy fiddling with some arcane device that probably had the power to either save or doom them, depending on if it was Tuesday or not. "Only when it lines up with yours," Vex replied, not looking up. Her fingers danced over the contraption, a blur of efficiency and sarcasm. Mord grunted, steering the ship with one hand and nursing a cup of something that could generously be called coffee with the other. You know, this whole situation with Xylaria reminds me of that time we had to deal with those sentient fungi. Remember that? We talked them into thinking they were having an existential crisis. Vex snorted. You mean you talked them into thinking that? I was just trying to keep them from infecting the ship's air supply. Details, details, Mord waved off her correction. Point is, humans have a long history of talking our way out of bad situations. Or into worse ones, depending on who you ask. Speaking of which, Vex said, her tone shifting as she finally pulled herself away from the device and looked at him. We're getting close to our next rendezvous with the Council. Ready for round 2? Ready as a cat with a bag over its head, Mord replied. Let's go dazzle them with our lunacy. The reckless dreamer docked with the sprawling, metallic beast that was the Interstellar Council's headquarters. The place was an enclave of species, each more bizarre than the last, a veritable zoo of dubious decision-making. As Mord and Vex made their way to the council chamber, they were met with the usual stares. Humans were a known quantity now, but that didn't mean everyone was comfortable with them. Some looked at Mord like he was a relic from a time when survival meant stabbing your neighbor and stealing their food. Inside, the chamber was abuzz with an energy that was equal parts anxiety and caffeine. Ambassador Thalker was already there, looking like someone had spilled oil on the carpet and decided to make the best of it. High Consul Virek Thal, a Zendari with an expression that could curdle milk, glowered at them from across the room. Mord, Thal intoned, his voice like sandpaper on glass. I understand you have new evidence to present. Ah, Thal, always a pleasure, Mord said, his tone dripping with enough sarcasm to drown an elephant. Yes, I've got just the thing to put your mind at ease. Thal's eyes narrowed, which was an impressive feat considering they were already slits. Your cavalier attitude is noted, Commander. And appreciated, I hope, Mord shot back, before producing a small holographic projector. With a press of a button, the room was filled with images of past human escapades, each more ridiculous than the last. There were clips of humans improvising under pressure, like that time they turned a space station's waste disposal into a makeshift rocket to escape a hostile blockade. This, Mord said, pointing to one particularly glorious instance of human creativity, is what we do best. Adapt, improvise, survive. It's not always pretty, but it works. Thal folded his arms, mandibles twitching. Your examples are unconventional. Unconventional is just a fancy word for effective, Mord replied. Look, I get it. Trusting us with something like Xylaria is like handing a toddler a chainsaw, but there's method to our madness. Or madness to your method, Thalker interjected, his gelatinous form rippling with what might have been amusement. Same difference, Mord shrugged. Point is, humans have been beating the odds since we decided to stop living in caves and start living on the precipice of disaster, Vex added helpfully. Exactly, Mord nodded. So why change now? Before any more cynical barbs could be exchanged, the chamber's main screen flickered to life with a new transmission. The atmosphere shifted as all attention turned towards it. What appeared on the screen was a sight to behold, or dread, depending on one's perspective. Xylaria in all its majestic, terrifying glory. A planet that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent, its surface a roiling mass of shifting landscapes and cityscapes. Well, isn't that just a big slice of nope? Mord muttered under his breath. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation settling over the council like a blanket of impending doom. Xylaria was closer than anticipated, and it didn't look like it was coming by for a friendly chat. We have to act, Xyler stated, his usual composure cracked by a hint of urgency. Yeah, no kidding, Mord said. But what exactly do you propose? A strongly worded letter, Thal's eyes flicked from the screen to Mord. We require a plan, Commander, not sarcasm. Fortunately, I can provide both, Mord replied, turning to address the entire council. Listen, we need to stop thinking of Xylaria as just a threat. It might be a planet with a bad attitude, but it's still a planet. Planets have patterns, systems, things we can exploit. And how do you propose we exploit a sentient world? Thalker asked, incredulity dripping from his voice like oil from him. By doing what we do best, Mord said, arms outstretched like a conductor before an orchestra. Improvising. Xylaria might be smart, but it's still bound by the rules of physics. We can use that to our advantage. There was a murmur of discussion among the alien delegates, skepticism mixed with an undeniable undercurrent of desperation. We could leverage its predictability, Vex chimed in, her analytical mind already running a dozen different simulations. If we can map its trajectory and behavior patterns, we might find a way to disrupt its assimilation process. Or redirect it, Mord added, with the confidence of a man who had no idea if he was right but knew he sounded convincing. And if you're wrong? Thal asked, his voice as cold as the void itself. Then we're screwed, Mord replied cheerfully. But hey, at least we tried. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's trying. There was a pause, the kind that stretched on like a bad joke at a funeral. Then slowly faces began to nod, some reluctantly, others with a spark of what might have been hope. Very well, Thal said, his voice resigned. We shall proceed with your plan. Mord flashed a grin, the kind that made you wish you hadn't bet against him. Great, let's get to work. We'll figure out how to knock Xylaria off its game. As the council dispersed, Mord and Vex were left to contemplate the monumental task ahead. Humans might be adaptable, but even they had limits. Pushing those limits had become something of a specialty. Think we can actually pull this off? Vex asked as they made their way back to the ship, the corridors of the council headquarters now a hive of activity, a flurry of species all preparing for whatever came next. Honestly, Mord said as they dodged a group of technicians hauling equipment, I have no idea, but sitting on our asses and hoping for the best isn't an option. Never is, Vex agreed. I just hope our penchant for chaos doesn't backfire this time. Yeah, well, Mord said with a wry smile. If it does, at least we'll go down in history or infamy. Pretty much the same thing when you think about it. The reckless dreamer awaited them, a faithful steed for their journey into the unknown. As they boarded, the ship hummed to life with a low, comforting rumble, like a beast eager for adventure. Time to make history or a mess, Mord said, settling back into the captain's seat. Vex rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress her grin. With you, there's never much difference. The ship launched into the blackness of space, its destination the ominous silhouette of Xylaria, a planet that seemed to breathe with dark intent. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger, but that had never stopped them before. Think the universe will be kind this time? Vex asked, her hand steady on the controls. I doubt it, Mord replied as the starlit void enveloped them. But who needs kindness when you've got insanity? Vex laughed, a sound that somehow made the impending doom feel a little less threatening. Insanity it is, then. With a shared glance full of determination and lunacy, they set their sights on the impossible task ahead. As the reckless dreamer sped towards Xylaria, one thing was certain. Win or lose, they were going to make it interesting. There was something exhilarating about diving headfirst into chaos with nothing but a half-baked plan and an abundance of attitude. It was the human way, and if Mord had anything to say about it, it would be the way that saved them all, or at least made for one hell of a story. The interstellar council chamber buzzed like a hornet's nest after being thwacked with a stick, which was exactly how Commander Lysander Mord liked it. If there was chaos and confusion, it meant the council was in the perfect state for a little human ingenuity, or insanity, depending on how one looked at it. Ambassador Thalker lingered near Mord, his gelatinous form doing what could only be described as jiggling with anxiety. Commander, the council requests more time to bicker and less time to act, Mord interrupted. Classic bureaucrats. They'd argue over the shape of a fire extinguisher while the building burns down around them. What they need, Thalker continued, ignoring Mord's sarcasm with the grace of a saint or a martyr, is a plan. Right, a plan, Mord said, like he was agreeing to something he had no intention of actually doing. Well, lucky them, I've got just the thing. Ambassador Thalker's body rippled in what could have been apprehension or gas. Does this involve more of your unconventional human tactics? Unconventional is just another word for brilliant, Mord replied, giving the ambassador a wink that would have been charming if it wasn't so smug. As they approached the meeting room, the doors slid open to reveal a wide array of alien species huddled in tense clusters. High Consul Virek Thal sat at the head of the table, looking like he just swallowed a cup of Psi or milk. Mord sauntered over, accompanied by Dr. Zinnia Vex, who was still tinkering with the arcane device like a kid trying to fix their old gaming console with duct tape and hope. "Ah, Mord," Thal greeted, his voice drier than a desert in a drought. "We were just discussing the futility of our situation. I love a good pep talk," Mord said, striding to the center of the room. "Now, let's talk strategy, shall we?" Thal gestured for silence, which fell over the room like a wet blanket. "We're listening, Commander." Mord tapped a panel on the table, and a holographic image of Xylaria bloomed to life above them. An ominous swirl of colors and landscapes, Xylaria glowed like a neon sign advertising doom. "First things first, we need to acknowledge Xylaria's strengths. It's big, it's dangerous, and it's coming toward us like an express train with a bad attitude." "Not exactly breaking news," someone muttered from the back. "True," Mord conceded. "But here's what you might not know. Xylaria isn't just a planet. It's a living entity with patterns and habits, like a cat that shreds your curtains every time you leave it alone. And just like a cat, we're going to use its habits against it," Vex added, her fingers dancing over the arcane device. "With a bit of analysis and some creativity, we can predict its moves." The room filled with the kind of skeptical silence usually reserved for politicians' campaign promises. "Enter Zethra," Mord announced with a flourish, as if introducing a magician about to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Zethra, the AI strategist that Mord had convinced to join their merry band of misfits, appeared on a screen to the right. Its digital form flickered, a shifting array of geometric shapes and unsettling eyes. "Greetings, sentient beings. I am Zethra. I calculate probabilities and devise strategies, often with more precision than your biological minds." "Charming as always, Zethra," Mord said. "Now, tell them what you've got." "Based on Xylaria's patterns," Zethra began, its voice a calm monotone that somehow carried the weight of condescension, "we can anticipate its next assimilation point. By strategically disrupting its surface with high-energy emissions, we may alter its trajectory." "High-energy emissions? You mean like blowing it up?" an alien delegate asked, the color of skepticism tinging its voice. "More like giving it a cosmic slap on the wrist," Mord said. "Enough to say back off, but not enough to start an interstellar fireworks display." "And if it doesn't work?" Thal inquired, his expression suggesting he expected nothing less than disaster. "Then we regroup, reassess, and try not to die," Vex replied with a shrug. "It's sort of our unofficial motto." The council engaged in a flurry of murmurs and arguments, species leaning in close to exchange words of disbelief or grudging curiosity. Even Thalker seemed a bit more gelatinous than usual, if that was possible. "Commander Mord," Thal said, his voice cutting through the noise, "while your proposition is intriguing, it lacks precedence. We are talking about a sentient planet. The implications are vast. Vast implications and limited options," Mord said. "Seems like the perfect mix for human involvement, don't you think?" Thalker's body quivered in what could have been either laughter or nervousness. "Your confidence is remarkable," Mord grinned. "Remarkable is just another word for incredibly foolhardy." The council eventually settled on a hesitant agreement, more from lack of alternatives than actual faith in the plan. Mord and Vex headed back to the Reckless Dreamer, the ship's corridors bustling with activity as preparations for the operation got underway. "So what's our first move?" Vex asked as they approached the ship's bridge, the familiar hum of machinery providing a welcome soundtrack to their thoughts. "First," Mord said, "we give Xylaria a wake-up call. Then we wait and see if it answers with a polite no thanks or a hostile get off my lawn. Reassuring, Vex said dryly. And here I was worried this was going to be easy. The reckless dreamer launched into the depths of space, hurtling toward Xylaria with the kind of reckless abandon that had become their calling card. The plan was simple. Approach, execute, and hope they didn't end up as cosmic mulch. Zethra, status report, Mord called out, the ship's interface flickering as the AI materialized. All systems optimal, Commander, Zethra replied. Our trajectory aligns with the predicted convergence point, initiating energy dispersal in 60 seconds. Vex worked the controls, her focus intense. Ready when you are, Mord. Mord leaned back, his hands clasped behind his head like a man on vacation instead of a commander about to poke the universe's most volatile bear. Let's see if a planet can take a joke. The reckless dreamer shuddered as the energy dispersal system came online, bathing the surrounding space in a brilliant glow. Xylaria loomed ahead, its surface churning with impossible landscapes and unfathomable malice. Energy dispersion in 3, 2, 1, Zethra counted down. A pulse of energy shot forth from the ship, a concentrated blast aimed directly at Xylaria. The planet's surface reacted like a beast provoked, rippling with visible outrage. Now we wait, Mord said, his voice betraying a hint of apprehension he otherwise concealed. The seconds stretched into minutes, the tension on the bridge rising with each tick. The crew held their breath, eyes glued to the display screens. Incoming energy spike from Xylaria, Zethra announced, sounding almost pleased with itself. That's not good, is it? Vex asked, her fingers hovering over the controls. Depends on your definition of good, Mord replied. If you mean we might have pissed off a planet, then no, it's not. The ship shuddered as a wave of energy washed over them, causing lights to flicker and systems to briefly stutter. Alarm klaxons wailed, a cacophony of alerts and warnings. Shields holding, Zethra reported. However, repeat engagement is not advisable. You think, Vex retorted, her eyes wide with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. Looks like we've got its attention, Mord said, half proud, half terrified. What's the status on Plan B? Working on it, Vex answered, her focus now split between the arcane device and the ship's readouts. Give me a minute before we start throwing more rocks at the hornet's nest. The bridge fell silent, the only sound the hum of the ship and the occasional beep of a console. Outside, Xylaria loomed, a reminder of the enormity of the task they faced. Well, Mord said, breaking the silence, if anyone needed a reminder that life is short and full of bad decisions, here we are. Vex snorted, half amused, half irritated. Yeah, and we're the poster children for all of it. With the initial attempt thwarted, Mord and his crew found themselves back at square one, their plan having only served to poke the bear rather than deter it. But Mord wasn't the type to give up just because things got a little dicey. All right, folks, he declared, rising to his feet with renewed determination. Let's regroup, recalibrate, and remember that impossibility is just another word for we haven't figured it out yet. The crew nodded, a mix of resignation and resolve. They may have been out of their depth, but they weren't about to let that stop them. As the reckless dreamer turned away from Xylaria, Mord couldn't help but feel a spark of hope amidst the chaos. Think the universe is laughing at us? Vex asked, as they set course back to the council. Probably, Mord replied, a grin playing at his lips. But I've always thought the best way to beat the odds is to make them laugh first. And with that, the reckless dreamer sailed into the unknown, carrying with it the weight of impossible expectations and the unwavering spirit of a species that refused to take no for an answer. The interstellar council chamber was buzzing with more anxiety than a caffeine-fueled squirt convention. Xylaria's tendrils were breaking through the planetary defenses like a teenager through a Wi-Fi password, inevitable and terrifying. Ambassador Thalker quivered beside High Consul Virek Thal, both of them resembling a wet cat and a grumpy bulldog in a heated debate about the merits of bath time. Commander Mord, Thal began, his voice sharp enough to file nails, The situation is deteriorating faster than expected. Our planetary defenses are being breached. We need immediate solutions. Immediate solutions. Mord drawled, leaning back in his chair like he was trying to cultivate an air of nonchalance amidst a forest fire. You mean besides screaming and waving our arms in existential panic, Thalker's gelatinous body wobbled with what might have been agreement or maybe the galactic equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Hard to tell with those blobby alien types. Commander, Thal pressed on, his patience thinner than a politician's promise. Xylaria is no ordinary threat. It's assimilating everything in its path. We require something substantial. Mord scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, I thought the whole energy slap was a pretty substantial please go away message. Apparently, Xylaria's not the sort to take a hint. It's like trying to shoo a bear with a fly swatter, Vex chimed in, arms crossed as she leaned against the console. Only the bear is a sentient planet with fewer charm points. A collective shudder ran through the assembly of alien delegates, as if they'd all stumbled into a cold shower simultaneously. We're not giving up yet, Mord declared. We just need to get more. Creative. Thal's eyebrows lifted, or at least the equivalent of whatever squiggly part of his anatomy served that function. Yeah, like adapting our tactics from a children's book on guerrilla warfare, Mord quipped. Hit and run, make a mess. Let's get the universe's most hostile furball in a knot, Doctor. Zinnia Vex tossed her hair back with a look of rebellious glee. I love it. We can retrofit some of our ships for quick strikes, plant confusion devices, and give it the old razzle-dazzle. Thalker's form undulated nervously. Confusion devices. Surely you jest. Oh, I never jest about confusion, Mord said, eyes gleaming with mischief. It's my favorite weapon. Works wonders on planets and bureaucrats alike. The council was less than thrilled, judging by the chorus of groans echoing around the room. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and Mord was a firm believer in the latter. High risk, high reward, Mord continued, pressing his luck. Xylaria's expecting a direct confrontation. It won't know how to handle something more. Unpredictable Thal, ever the voice of reason or at least the designated killjoy, expressed doubt. Are you suggesting we resort to chaos? Chaos is just liberty with a bad haircut, Mord shot back. Besides, it's not like we have any better options lined up, unless one of you has a secret doomsday button I haven't heard about. Thal's lips twitched, an almost smile breaking through his stern facade. No doomsday button. Just a room full of increasingly worried representatives. Worries for people who have time for it, Mord replied, rising to his feet. We've got a planet to prank. Asterisk back on the reckless dreamer. The crew was buzzing with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The ship's corridors were more alive than a beehive on a sugar rush. Techs and engineers prepping for what was likely going to be the craziest battle the universe had ever seen. All right, folks, Mord addressed the crew, his voice carrying an air of showmanship. We're about to become the biggest thorn in Xylaria's side since, well, probably ever. Vex was at the helm, her hands a blur over the controls. We're rigging up the confusion devices now. I'm thinking a mix of noise, holograms, and good old-fashioned pyrotechnics. It'll be like a rock concert from hell. Perfect, Mord grinned. Nothing says go away like a flashbang serenade. Zethra's digital form flickered to life on the ship's main display. Commander, I calculate a 32.7% chance of success with current resources. Recommend prioritizing targets with strategic value to maximize disruption. 32.7%. Vex snorted. I like those odds. Means we've got room for improvement. The ship's AI might have sighed if it was programmed with emotions. Improvement, yes. Room for catastrophic failure, also yes. Mord clapped his hands together. All right, team, let's put on a show that'll make the history books, or at least the obituaries. Time to give Xylaria a headache it won't forget. With that, the reckless dreamer plunged back into the fray. diving toward Xylaria with all the grace of a swan dive into a vat of molten chaos. The ship moved with purpose, its engines roaring as it skimmed the planet's surface, dropping confusion devices like a deranged Santa on an intergalactic coke binge. Deploying first wave, Vex announced, her voice steady even as the ship shuddered from the planet's defensive fire. Explosions lit up the void, brilliant bursts of light and sound, designed to disrupt Xylaria's focus. Holographic projections flickered into existence, creating phantoms that danced and weaved, taunting the planet with their ephemeral presence. "Looks like we've got its attention," Mord noted, watching the display screens showing Xylaria's surface reacting furiously. "Now let's see how it likes a little chaos." The reckless dreamer wove through the chaos, its newly refitted systems humming with potential. The crew worked in perfect sync, improvising as needed, turning the battlefield into a cacophony of confusion and misdirection. "Second wave incoming," Vex called out, her fingers flying over the console with practiced precision. Another series of devices erupted across Xylaria's surface, adding to the sensory overload. The planet's attempts to counter were met with decoys and distractions, each one designed to keep it off balance. The plan, as insane as it was, seemed to be working. Xylaria's absorption slowed, its tendrils hesitating as they encountered the unexpected. The planet almost seemed to recoil, unsure of how to proceed against such an unorthodox assault. "Zethra status?" Mord asked, his tone carrying the faintest hint of optimism. "Hostility levels reduced by 12%, the AI reported. Xylaria's response patterns are destabilizing." "Continue engagement for optimal results," Mord grinned, feeling the thrill of the gamble. "All right, people, let's keep the pressure up. We've got it on the ropes, now let's see if we can't push it back a bit more." The ship's crew responded with a collective nod, each member focused on their task as they maintained the offensive. Out in the blackness of space, the battle continued, a testament to human ingenuity and the refusal to bow down before a challenge. The reckless dreamer darted and dodged, a ballet of destruction and chaos that left Xylaria bewildered and temporarily stymied. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was a start, a small victory against a monumental threat. Back in the council chamber, Thal watched the unfolding events with cautious optimism, his earlier skepticism giving way to a newfound respect for the human involvement. Even Thalker seemed slightly less gelatinous, a hint of relief spreading through his amorphous form. "Commander Mord," Thal said through the comm link, his tone surprisingly warm, "your tactics, while unconventional, appear to be having an effect." "The council is impressed," Mord replied, feigning surprise. "Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation for recklessness to maintain." "Rest assured your reputation remains intact," Thal assured him. With a final flourish, the reckless dreamer pulled back from Xylaria, leaving the planet to grapple with the aftermath of their impromptu concert. It was a small step toward a larger battle, but it was a step in the right direction. As the ship navigated away from the chaos, Mord turned to his crew. "We did good today," he said, "but we're not done yet. Keep your eyes peeled and your wits sharp. There's a long road ahead." Vex nodded, her expression a mix of satisfaction and determination. "Wouldn't have it any other way." With Xylaria's forces temporarily disrupted, the council and the crew of the reckless dreamer took a moment to regroup and assess their next move. The stakes were higher than ever, the threat looming larger with each passing day, but for the first time there was a glimmer of hope. And as Mord settled into the captain's chair, he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. "Well, universe," he muttered to himself, "looks like the joke's on you this time." In the face of cosmic chaos and overwhelming odds, the humans had once again refused to back down. They were irreverent, unpredictable, and maybe just a little bit crazy. But that was their strength. And as long as they had breath in their lungs and a pinch of defiance in their hearts, they'd keep fighting. Because in the grand scheme of things, what was life without a little bit of chaos? The Interstellar Council chamber was a place where hope went to die. Assembled in the cold, metallic room were various representatives from across the galaxy, species of every shape, size, and level of distaste for one another. Today, they shared a common bond, a collective sense of impending doom, courtesy of the ever-encroaching Xylaria. High Consul Virek Thal, looking as disgruntled as a bulldog caught in the rain, began the meeting. Reports indicate Xylaria has assimilated another 3 planets since our last gathering. Morale is at an all-time low. At least it's efficient, Mord muttered under his breath, earning a sideways glance from Ambassador Thalker, who quivered more than usual. If anxiety could be bottled, Thalker would be a fountain of the stuff. Thalker's voice wobbled across the room. Our defenses are crumbling. Is there any update from Commander Mord's? Unconventional tactics. Mord leaned back, arms crossed. If by unconventional you mean actually made a dent, then yeah. We managed to slow it down, but it's like telling a hurricane to take 5. Thal's eyes narrowed. And yet here we are, planets still disappearing like socks in a dryer. Mord shrugged. Never said it was a permanent fix. We're dealing with a sentient planet here. I'm just the guy with a wrench trying to fix a black hole. The room simmered with tension. Dr. Zinnia Vex, ever the beacon of rebellious glee, spoke up. Maybe Xylaria's just lonely. You know, trying to make friends, one assimilation at a time. Somebody should introduce it to speed dating, Mord quipped. Would save us all a lot of trouble. Thalker's gelatinous form shivered dramatically. Perhaps there's a way to communicate with it to understand its motives. Mord exchanged a glance with Vex. Speak alien planet language. Sure, I'll just grab my intergalactic Rosetta Stone. Vex chuckled, twirling a stray lock of hair. All this time, and we still haven't mastered the art of talking to oversized rocks. Must have skipped that day in linguistics class. On a serious note, Thal interjected, because every party needs a pooper, we must consider our next steps. We cannot afford to lose more ground. Mord sat forward, the weight of the universe pressing against his shoulders. Well, maybe we can't stop it, but we can at least figure out what makes it tick. Vex nodded, a glint of mischief in her eyes. And if we find a weakness, we exploit it like it's the last donut in the break room. Asterisk. Back on the reckless dreamer, Mord found himself in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the cold, indifferent stars. They twinkled like a million tiny middle fingers, reminding him that the universe owed him nothing. You look like you're about to fire yourself out an airlock, Vex said, joining him. Her voice was teasing yet laced with concern. Considering it, Mord replied. But then I'd miss out on the joy of getting vaporized by Xylaria instead. Vex nudged him with her elbow. Come on, Mord. We're not dead yet. Look on the bright side. If we find a way to stop it, we'll be heroes. They might even name a holiday after us. Great, Mord said dryly. We'll call it Pretend We Knew What We Were Doing Day. The ship's AI, Zethra, flickered to life beside them. Commander, I have analyzed Xylaria's recent movements. There is a pattern in its assimilation process, anomalies that could be potential weaknesses. Mord raised an eyebrow. Anomalies? You mean it does have an Achilles heel besides being a massive jerk? Perhaps, Zethra replied. These anomalies suggest a disruption in its energy absorption. They coincide with regions of high electromagnetic interference. Vex clapped her hands. So, we throw some electromagnetic noise at it and see if it chokes. It's a start, Mord conceded. Better than waiting around to be planet number 4. The weight of their situation hung heavy in the air, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they had something more than desperation on their side. They had a glimmer of hope, albeit a flickering one. All right, Mord said, squaring his shoulders. Let's get back to work. We've got an intergalactic bully to trip up. The next few days were a blur of activity. The crew of the reckless dreamer scrambled to retrofit their ship with whatever tech they could scrounge together. Shield generators, magnetic amplifiers, the works. It was like trying to stop a freight train with a cardboard box, but they didn't have the luxury of second guessing. Mord found himself buried in reports and blueprints, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. He questioned every decision, every gamble, but there was no room for doubt, not now. "Do you ever feel like the universe is just waiting for us to fail?" Vex asked one evening, her voice cutting through the hum of the ship. "Every damn day," Mord replied. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's just a test to see how stubborn we can really be," Vex smirked. "Good thing I'm too stubborn to quit, and too crazy," Mord added with a grin. "Wouldn't have it any other way," she shot back. With the new plan in motion, the reckless dreamer set its sights on Xylaria once more. As they approached the looming planet, Mord's mind was a whirlwind of doubt and determination. It was their darkest hour, but he refused to let it be their last. "Initiating Operation Annoy the Planet," Vex announced from her station, her fingers flying over the controls. "Catchy," Mord said. "I'll be sure to trademark it if we survive." The ship's systems roared to life, sending waves of electromagnetic interference pulsing toward Xylaria. It was a wild, desperate shot, but desperation was a powerful ally when it had nowhere else to turn. "Feedback from Xylaria," Zethra reported. "Energy absorption is fluctuating. It appears to be confused." "Confused? Good," Mord said. "Let's keep it that way." The crew worked in perfect sync, each member driven by a singular purpose: to survive, to fight back, to prove that even against insurmountable odds, humanity wouldn't lie down and die without one hell of a fight. As the electromagnetic assault continued, something incredible happened. Xylaria's tendrils, those monstrous appendages responsible for its destructive absorption, began to retract. The planet shuddered, its surface rippling with uncertainty. "We're actually doing it," Vex breathed, her voice tinged with awe. "We're pissing off a planet." Mord couldn't help but laugh, a deep, cathartic sound that bubbled up from a place he'd almost forgotten existed. Turns out planets aren't so tough after all, but Xylaria wasn't finished. With a roar that seemed to echo across the cosmos, the planet unleashed a retaliatory wave, a desperate attempt to swat away the annoyance that dared to defy it. "Brace for impact," Mord shouted, gripping the armrests of his chair as the ship rocked violently. The reckless dreamer shook and groaned under the assault, but it held firm. It was a testament not to the strength of their ship, but to the spirit of its crew, a ragtag bunch of stubborn, reckless souls who refused to give up. As the chaos subsided, the crew took stock of their situation. They were bruised, battered, and more than a little bit insane for taking on a sentient planet, but they were alive. And in space, that was as close to victory as you got. "Commander Mord," Zethra's voice came through the comms, "Xylaria's energy levels are critical. Its absorption patterns are failing." "We did it," Vex whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mord let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We actually did it." Back in the council chamber, the news of their success spread like wildfire. High Consul Thal, for once, looked genuinely impressed. Thalker, meanwhile, seemed less gelatinous, his form vibrating with something resembling hope. "Commander Mord," Thal's voice crackled through the comm link, "your actions have given us—" "Don't say it," Mord interrupted. "We're not done yet, but I'll take a pat on the back if you're offering." Thal chuckled, a rare sound. "Consider it given." As the reckless dreamer set a course away from the now weakened Xylaria, Mord sat back in his chair, a weary smile on his face. They hadn't won the war, not by a long shot, but they'd won a battle, and that was enough. "All right, team," Mord said, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion and triumph. "Let's get some rest and figure out how we're going to piss off the universe tomorrow." Vex laughed, her laughter filling the ship with warmth. "I'm sure we'll think of something." As the stars streaked by, Mord reflected on their journey. It was far from over, and the challenges ahead were as daunting as ever. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, a brief respite in the eye of the storm. In the vast, uncaring expanse of space, the reckless dreamer and its crew had proven one thing beyond doubt. No matter the odds, no matter the stakes, humanity would always rise to the occasion with a grin and a middle finger raised to fate. Because in the end, What was life without a little chaos and a lot of defiance? Lysander Mord, always on the cutting edge of disaster, Mord muttered to himself, pacing the cramped bridge of the reckless dreamer. The smell of burnt circuitry hung in the air, a testament to their latest misadventure with Xylaria. Just once, I'd like the universe to go easy on me. Maybe throw in a free drink or a masseuse. Vex, ever the optimist in a sea of pessimism, looked up from her terminal with a grin. If the universe gave you a break, you'd probably think it was some elaborate prank. And you'd be right, Mord shot back, leaning against the console. But at least I'd get a free drink out of it. Zethra, the ship's AI with a penchant for cold, hard facts and the occasional unintended sarcasm, chimed in. Commander, the Council has requested a status update on our latest endeavors against Xylaria. Great, perfect timing for a progress report on our impending doom, Mord replied, rolling his eyes. Tell them we're working on a plan and that they're welcome to send over any spare geniuses they might have lying around. Vex chuckled, her fingers dancing across the controls as she pulled up the schematics for their latest harebrained scheme. We've got a few tricks left up our sleeves, right? I mean, apart from sarcasm and blind optimism. Well, there's this beauty, Mord pointed to a glowing section on the display, a tangle of adaptive technology they'd cobbled together from abandoned alien tech and a few questionable purchases. It's supposed to turn Xylaria's strengths into weaknesses. Think of it as a cosmic judo throw. Vex looked at the display, tilting her head like a curious bird. Adaptive tech that fights back using its own energy. You think it'll work? Mord shrugged, a smirk tugging at his lips. It's either that or we start a reality show where planets and ships negotiate their differences with hugs and apologies. Coming soon to a galaxy near you, Vex quipped, her enthusiasm infectious despite the weight of their situation. Zethra's holographic form flickered, its digital face devoid of any emotion, which was damn near impressive given the circumstances. Commander, incoming message from the Interstellar Council. High Consul Thal wishes to speak with you. Mord sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Put him through, Zethra. Might as well get this over with. The screen blinked and High Consul Virek Thal's face appeared, his expression a mix of stern disapproval and grudging respect, a look Mord had become intimately familiar with. Commander Mord, I've been informed of your latest strategy, adaptive technology. Do you really believe this is the solution? Believe it, Mord replied, the sarcasm practically oozing from his voice. I believe it's the best shot we've got. Unless you've got a secret weapon you haven't mentioned like a planet-sized fly swatter. Thal's mouth twitched, the closest to a smile Mord had ever seen. Your resilience is commendable, Commander. However, the Council is divided. Some doubt your methods. Join the club, Mord said, leaning back in his chair. But let's face it, Thal, we're all taking shots in the dark here. Xylaria's a big, angry mystery and we're just trying not to be its next snack. The consul's face hardened. We need results, Mord. Morale is low and faith in humanity's ability to overcome this threat is waning. Mord nodded, the weight of leadership a familiar companion. We're on it, Thal. Just keep the council from imploding in the meantime. Thal's image flickered and vanished, leaving the bridge in silence. Mord exchanged a look with Vex, who shrugged. No pressure, right? None at all, Mord replied, his voice a perfect mix of sarcasm and sincerity. Just the fate of everything we know hanging by a thread. The next few hours were spent in a frenzy of preparation, each crew member buzzing with nervous energy and the shared determination to give Xylaria the cosmic equivalent of a wedgie. Mord moved through the ship, checking on the modifications and lending a hand where needed. He was more wrench monkey than commander at this point, but if it kept them alive, he wasn't about to complain. Zethra, Mord called out, his voice echoing through the corridors. Status on the adaptive array. Integration is complete, Commander, Zethra's voice replied, calm and collected. We are ready to commence the operation at your command. Mord took a deep breath, feeling the tension thrumming through his veins like a live wire. All right, team. Let's see if Xylaria's got a sense of humor. Back on the bridge, Vex was poised at her station, her fingers dancing over the keys with the grace of a concert pianist playing at a funeral. "Ready when you are, Commander," Mord nodded, a smirk playing on his lips. "Let's annoy the hell out of this thing." With a flick of a switch, the reckless dreamer began broadcasting its adaptive signal, an intricate dance of frequencies designed to confuse and disrupt Xylaria's energy absorption process. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary thrown from halfway across the galaxy, but at this point it was all they had. "Signal is live," Vex reported, her eyes locked on the readouts. "We're hitting it with everything we've got." Mord leaned forward in his chair, watching the screen with bated breath. The image of Xylaria filled the display, a swirling mass of chaos and destruction, its surface shimmering with energy like a cat that just discovered its tail. "Response?" Mord asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Zethra's hologram blinked to life. "Xylaria's energy levels are fluctuating. The adaptive signal is causing interference in its systems." Vex whooped, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "We're actually doing it. We're giving it a digital headache." Mord grinned, feeling a surge of exhilaration and victory he hadn't felt in ages. "How's that for human ingenuity? Take that, you oversized rock." As the signal continued to disrupt Xylaria's processes, the effects became more pronounced. The planet's tendrils, those monstrous appendages responsible for absorbing everything in their path, began to writhe and retract, as if in discomfort. It was a sight that would have been awe-inspiring if it wasn't so damn terrifying. "Keep it up," Mord urged, his voice carrying the fervor of a man who'd just seen the light at the end of an incredibly dark tunnel. "Don't let up," Vex nodded, her hands flying over the controls with unwavering precision. "Let's see how it likes a little reverse engineering." For a moment, hope flickered bright and fierce on the bridge of the reckless dreamer. They were fighting back, not with brute force but with the cleverness and audacity that defined their species, a scrappy, irreverent resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. But the universe, as always, refused to make things easy. With a sudden, violent shudder, Xylaria retaliated, unleashing a torrent of energy that slammed into the ship with bone-rattling force. "Brace!" Mord shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and the groaning of the ship's hull. The reckless dreamer lurched and bucked, the crew gripping their consoles and chairs as they were tossed about like leaves in a hurricane. It was chaos, pure and unadulterated, and for a heart-stopping moment Mord feared they might not pull through. "Status!" he barked, his voice hoarse from exertion. Zethra was the first to respond, her voice calm and unflappable despite the turmoil. "Shields are holding, but only just. We sustained minor structural damage." "Minor," Vex repeated, her voice shaky but laced with adrenaline. "That's a word that's doing a lot of heavy lifting right now." Mord chuckled, a sound that was more relief than mirth. "Minor damage is better than no ship. Let's keep it that way." As the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship and assess the damage, Mord took a moment to gather his thoughts. They dealt a blow to Xylaria, but it was far from finished. If anything, they'd only managed to piss it off, and pissed-off planets were notoriously tricky to deal with. "Commander," Zethra said, her holographic form flickering back to life. "Xylaria's energy levels are stabilizing, but the adaptive signal is maintaining some degree of interference. We have temporarily disrupted its processes." Mord nodded, relief and determination warring within him. "Good, let's keep up the pressure. If we can't stop it, we'll distract it long enough to come up with something better." Vex shot him a look, her expression a mixture of amusement and incredulity. "You really think we can keep this up indefinitely?" "No," Mord admitted, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But we can keep it off balance long enough to buy us some time." As the reckless dreamer continued its audacious dance around Xylaria, Mord allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd found a chink in the armor of a sentient planet, a small victory in a war that was far from over. But for now, it was enough. Enough to remind him why they fought, why they dared to defy the odds with little more than grit and gallows humor. "All right, team," Mord said, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility and the spark of hope. "Let's show that planet what happens when you mess with a bunch of stubborn humans." Vex grinned, her fingers poised over the controls. "You mean we annoy it until it begs for mercy?" "Exactly," Mord replied, his eyes gleaming with defiance. "Because if there's one thing we're good at, it's being a thorn in the universe's side." And so they continued, a ragtag crew aboard a ship held together by duct tape and determination, against a foe that seemed insurmountable. But if there was one thing Lysander Mord knew, it was that the universe loved an underdog. And as long as they had breath in their bodies and a plan, no matter how harebrained, they'd keep fighting. Because giving up was for quitters, and Mord had never been one to quit a fight, especially not one this important. So they fought on, laughing in the face of doom and daring the universe to do its worst. After all, what was life without a little chaos and a lot of defiance? Commander Lysander Mord barely had time to catch his breath before the alarm started blaring again, screeching like a banshee that had stubbed its toe. The reckless dreamer was still in one piece, which was more than he could say for his nerves. But that's what happens when you try to annoy a sentient planet into submission. "Zethra, what the hell is going on now?" Mord asked, his voice a mix of exasperation and morbid curiosity. The AI was as close to sarcasm as a machine could get, and he could swear it enjoyed these moments. "Xylaria is regaining control of its systems, Commander," Zethra replied, as if discussing the weather. "It appears our digital headache is wearing off." "Terrific." "Just when I thought we had it on the ropes," Mord muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Any ideas on how to keep this rodeo going? The adaptive signal is still providing some interference," Zethra continued, "but we may need to improvise further measures to maintain our advantage." "Great," Mord said, glancing at Vex. "Any brilliant ideas, Dr. Vex? Or should we just improvise until something explodes?" Vex didn't miss a beat, her eyes alight with that manic, slightly terrifying energy Mord had come to rely on. "How about we turn the adaptive signal into a feedback loop and see if we can get Xylaria to short-circuit itself? It's risky, but hey, when has that ever stopped us?" Mord laughed, the sound as dry as the vacuum outside their hull. "Risky? I was starting to think that was your middle name. Let's give it a shot. Worst case, we go out with a bang instead of a whimper." "On it," Vex said, her fingers already flying over her console. The woman was a marvel, half-mad scientist, half-miracle worker, and completely indispensable. As Vex worked her magic, Mord turned his attention to the rest of the crew. "All right, folks, you heard the lady. We're going to try and give Xylaria a self-inflicted wedgie. Buckle up. It's gonna be a wild ride." The bridge crew scrambled, each one a cog in the barely functioning machine that was the reckless dreamer. Mord felt a pang of something akin to pride. They were a motley bunch, but they were his motley bunch, and that counted for something in this universe. Minutes dragged on like hours as Vex implemented her plan, the ship systems humming with barely contained energy. Mord could almost feel the anticipation crackling in the air, a storm waiting to break. "Feedback loop initiated," Vex said, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Let's see if Xylaria likes a taste of its own medicine." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The image of Xylaria on the main screen began to flicker, the planet's surface rippling like a disturbed pond. Tendrils of energy lashed out, striking at nothing, as if the planet was trying to swat away an invisible pest. "Well, would you look at that," Mord said, a grin spreading across his face. "I think we just gave it a cosmic migraine." The bridge erupted in cheers, the crew momentarily forgetting their fear in the thrill of the moment. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and Mord was going to savor it for all it was worth. "Don't celebrate just yet," Zethra's voice cut through the noise, ever the party pooper. "Xylaria is recalibrating. We need to maintain pressure or it will recover." "Of course it is," Mord replied, rolling his eyes. "Nothing ever stays broken for long in this galaxy except maybe my luck." Vex was already on it, her focus unyielding, adjusting the signal. Let's see if we can keep this headache going a little longer. As the reckless dreamer continued its dance, weaving through space with all the grace of a drunken ballerina, Mord's thoughts turned to the Interstellar Council. He wondered how they were faring, their collective morale hanging by frayed threads. If they could see this, maybe it would finally light a fire under them. "Zethra, get me Thal," Mord ordered. Time for a little show and tell. The screen flickered to life, and High Consul Virek Thal's face appeared, looking as though he'd just eaten something particularly unpleasant. "Commander Mord, I assume this is important." "Depends on your definition of important," Mord replied, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "But if you'd like to see Xylaria having a bad day, you're in luck. We managed to short-circuit its systems, at least temporarily." Thal's eyebrows climbed his forehead, a rare display of genuine surprise. "You mean to tell me you found a way to disrupt Xylaria's processes?" "Yeah. Well, disrupt might be putting it mildly," Mord said, watching as the screen showed Xylaria's energy tendrils flailing uselessly. "Let's just say we're giving it something to think about." For a moment, Thal looked like he might actually smile, but then his usual bureaucratic mask slipped back into place. "This is promising, Commander. Perhaps there's hope after all." "Hope? I thought that was a dirty word around here," Mord quipped. "But sure, let's call it hope." As the conversation continued, Mord felt a shift in the air, as if the universe had decided to throw them a bone for once. The Council, against all odds, was beginning to rally, unified by the prospect of victory, however slim. "We'll need to coordinate efforts," Thal was saying, his voice steady and determined. "If your strategy can hold Xylaria at bay, the other council members must act in concert to capitalize on this opportunity." "Sounds like a plan," Mord said, nodding. "Just make sure everyone keeps their heads on straight. Last thing we need is someone hitting the panic button." Thal's image flickered and vanished, leaving Mord with a sense of cautious optimism. It was a strange feeling, like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, but he'd take what he could get. "All right, team," Mord said, addressing the bridge crew. "Looks like we're not the only ones fighting back. The Council's finally waking up." Vex turned, her grin infectious. "About time. I was starting to think they were all just holograms." Mord chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's keep up the pressure, see if we can turn this headache into a full-blown migraine for our rocky friend." As the crew redoubled their efforts, Mord felt the stirrings of something he'd nearly forgotten. Hope. Not the naive, starry-eyed kind, but the gritty, determined sort that came from knowing there was no turning back. For Iors they continued, the reckless dreamer a thorn in Xylaria's side, refusing to be plucked. Every time the planet tried to regain control, Vex was there, counteracting its every move with a deftness that bordered on genius. Mord watched it all unfold, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and contingencies. He knew the situation was precarious, their victory hanging by the thinnest of threads, but he'd be damned if he let that stop him. "Zethra," Mord said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Keep monitoring Xylaria's responses. Let me know the moment it finds a way around our little trick." "Acknowledged, Commander," Zethra replied, ever vigilant. "Your current course of action is proving effective, but Xylaria's adaptability is comparable to your own." "Of course it is," Mord muttered. "Because nothing's ever easy." As the Iors stretched into days, the ship's crew fell into a rhythm, the ebb and flow of their battle against Xylaria becoming almost routine. The universe had a funny way of normalizing even the most absurd of situations. "Commander," Vex said during a rare lull, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "We've been running this loop for so long, I'm starting to think Xylaria and I should start a band." Mord smirked, his own fatigue threatening to drag him down. "Yeah, what would you call it?" "The Cosmic Headaches," Vex replied without missing a beat. "#1 hit, Planetary Pain." Mord barked a laugh, the sound echoing in the bridge. "I like it. Maybe after we save the universe we can sell tickets." But their banter was cut short as Zethra's voice cut through the air, her tone urgent. Commander, Xylaria's energy levels are rising. It's attempting a new strategy. Of course it is, Mord said, pushing himself upright. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that planets don't know when to quit. The crew sprang into action, their movements a well-practiced dance. They knew the stakes, understood the gravity of their situation, but they faced it with the same irreverence that had carried them this far. "What's it trying this time?" Mord asked, his gaze fixed on the main screen as Xylaria's energy signature fluctuated wildly. "It appears to be focusing its energy into a concentrated pulse," Zethra reported. "Potentially an attempt to overload our systems." "Great. Just what we needed," Mord grumbled. "All right, Vex, can we redirect the feedback loop to absorb some of that energy?" Vex's fingers flew over her console, her expression one of fierce concentration. "Working on it. But if this doesn't work, we might be looking at a very short career as interstellar heroes." Mord nodded, the weight of their situation settling over him like a shroud. But he'd faced worse odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. "Zethra, keep the shield steady. Everyone else, hold on to something. This is gonna get bumpy." As the reckless dreamer braced for impact, Mord felt that familiar thrill of adrenaline coursing through his veins. They were gamblers on the edge of the galaxy, betting everything on a roll of the cosmic dice. The ship shuddered violently as Xylaria unleashed its assault, the energy pulse slamming into their shields with the force of a freight train. The hull groaned, the lights flickered, but the ship held, a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. "Feedback loops holding," Vex shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. "We're absorbing some of the energy, but I don't know how long we can keep this up." "Long enough," Mord replied, his voice steady and unyielding. "We've come this far, no sense in giving up now." As the energy pulse gradually subsided, Mord allowed himself a moment of relief. They'd survived another round, but the battle was far from over. Xylaria was relentless, an adversary that refused to be beaten. But if there was one thing Lysander Mord knew, it was that sometimes the best victories were the hardest one. And as long as they had breath in their bodies, they'd keep fighting, their laughter and defiance echoing across the stars. Because in the end, that was what it meant to be human, to stand against the darkness with nothing but a smile and a stubborn refusal to back down. And if the universe had a problem with that, well, it could take a number and get in line. The aftermath of Xylaria's latest temper tantrum left the reckless dreamer in a state somewhere between barely holding together and cosmic scrap heap. Commander Lysander Mord sat in his chair, the vague impression of a smile on his face like he'd just won a game of poker with a pair of threes. Around him, the bridge crew slowly picked themselves up, each looking like they might start a bar fight with the universe itself. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits with a ship held together by spite and duct tape," Mord muttered, running a hand through his hair, which by now had taken on the consistency of a used mop. "Spite and duct tape," Zethra deadpanned, her voice dripping with just enough sarcasm to drown a small creature. "The true pillars of space exploration. Hey, we're also fueled by caffeine and sheer bloody-mindedness," Vex shot back, tapping furiously at her console. "Don't forget that." Just then, the comms panel lit up like a cheap nightclub, heralding the arrival of a message from the Interstellar Council. High Consul Virek Thal's face appeared, looking like he'd just swallowed a live eel. Mord leaned back, adopting the relaxed posture of a man who had given up on the idea that life would ever be simple. "Commander Mord," Thal began, his tone caught between begrudging respect and outright disbelief. "We've received word of your success against Xylaria. It seems congratulations are in order." Mord feigned surprise, placing a hand over his heart. "Really? I was expecting a reprimand for scuffing the universe's shoes or something." Thal's lips twitched, almost as if he was considering a smile. "Rest assured, Commander, the Council is impressed by your results. Your unconventional methods have, against all odds, bought us some much-needed time." "Unconventional," Mord chuckled, mirroring Thal's diplomatic choice of words. "Sounds like a fancy way of saying half-baked, but I'll take it. In light of recent events, Thal continued, ignoring Mord's quip, the Council is convening to discuss incorporating adaptive strategies into our future defenses. Your team's work has proven that adaptability is a critical, albeit unexpected, asset. Unexpected, huh? Mord replied, his tone all smug satisfaction. You make it sound like you didn't believe in us. Thal tilted his head slightly, his expression conceding the point. Let's just say the Council is learning not to underestimate humanity. You certainly have an unconventional approach to diplomacy. Mord considered this for a moment, then nodded. Diplomacy's just a fancy word for figuring out how not to get blown up, really. Quite, Thal said, voice dry as a Martian desert. The Council will be sending representatives to formalize a new era of cooperation. Hopefully, we can avoid another incident like Xylaria. Cooperation, eh? Mord scratched his chin thoughtfully. Fancy word, cooperation. Means we all get to blame each other when things go wrong, right? Thal's expression was the closest he'd ever get to a grin. Precisely, Commander. I knew you'd understand. The connection closed, leaving the bridge in a silence broken only by the occasional crackle of overstressed circuitry. Vex leaned back, stretching with the exaggerated elegance of a cat waking from a nap. Looks like we're officially heroes, she said, voice tinged with an irony that nearly dripped onto the floor. Maybe they'll throw us a parade. Yeah, Mord snorted, a parade of lawsuits for damages incurred to intergalactic peace. Well, if it's any consolation, Zethra said, her voice taking on that familiar sardonic edge, we've upgraded from incompetent nuisances to marginally less incompetent nuisances. Progress, I believe they call it. Oh joy, Mord sighed, rubbing his temples. Promotion by way of not dying horribly. Just what I always wanted. The crew shared a round of laughs that were more relief than humor. They had faced down a sentient planet and lived to tell the tale. That deserved at least a small celebration, even if it was just in the form of a half-decent meal and a stiff drink. I'll get us a reservation at the finest space diner this side of the Milky Way, Mord announced, pushing himself out of his chair. Assuming we haven't already been banned for life. As the crew began to disperse, Mord caught Vex's eye. Any chance our friend Xylaria will play nice now? Vex shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey optimism, resignation, and a touch of madness all at once. Who knows? Maybe we taught it a lesson, or maybe it's just waiting to turn us into space mulch. That's the spirit, Mord said with a grin. Never let the universe think you're taking it too seriously. With the reckless dreamer patched up as best as it could be, they set course for the Council's headquarters. Mord took a moment to appreciate the irony of the situation. A ragtag crew of troublemakers being called in to discuss strategy with the galaxy's bureaucratic elite. If that wasn't a cosmic joke, he didn't know what was. When they finally docked at the Council's sprawling metallic behemoth, it was hard to tell if the ship was relieved or if it simply wheezed to a halt out of sheer exhaustion. Home sweet bureaucratic home, Mord muttered as he stepped off the ramp, taking in the sight of the Council's shiny corridors. It was the kind of place that practically screamed, "We take ourselves way too seriously." High Consul Thal greeted them, flanked by a small entourage of diplomats and aides who looked as though they'd rather be anywhere else. The consul's expression was one of carefully measured cordiality, like a man who'd been forced to swallow a very bitter pill. "Welcome, Commander," Thal said, his voice laden with the weight of formality. "The Council is eager to hear your insights on adaptive strategies." "Insights?" Mord raised an eyebrow, resisting the urge to laugh. "I've got plenty of those, but you might want to screen them for sarcasm." "I'm sure we'll manage," Thal replied, before gesturing for them to follow. The walk to the Council chamber was filled with the kind of awkward silence one might experience in an elevator ride with a particularly verbose stranger. Mord couldn't help but notice the walls, gleaming in their oppressive uniformity, seemed to close in with every step. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with the tension of 100 species trying to decide if they should be impressed or appalled by the humans' recent exploits. Mord could practically hear their thoughts. They survived, but at what cost to our dignified status quo? Commander Mord, Thal began, addressing the gathered representatives. If you would, please share how you and your crew managed to, disrupt Xylaria's systems. Mord cleared his throat, stepping forward with the air of a man about to sell the universe the most convoluted, barely functioning solution imaginable. It was simple, really, he began, lying through his teeth with the ease of a seasoned politician. We just talked to it. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber like a particularly juicy piece of gossip at a cocktail party. Mord held back a grin. He had them now. Talk to it. An alien with more tentacles than sense demanded. How does one talk to a planet? Very carefully, Mord replied, savoring the bewildered expressions. And with plenty of sarcasm. Turns out being cheeky works even when you're dealing with sentient celestial bodies. The adaptive signal, Vex piped up, saving Mord from having to explain further, used a feedback loop that mirrored Xylaria's own systems. It was like arguing with itself. Confused it just long enough for us to slip through its defenses. Fascinating, Thal mused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. It seems adaptability truly is humanity's greatest strength. More like stubbornness, Mord corrected, crossing his arms. You'd be amazed how far you can get just by refusing to give up. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from skeptical to downright envious. It was one thing to face an enemy. It was another to outwit it with nothing more than improvisation and a bit of gallows humor. After what felt like an eternity of deliberation, Thal finally addressed the room. In light of recent events, the Council proposes the incorporation of adaptive strategies into our collective defenses. Let us learn from humanity's example. Mord half expected the room to erupt into chaos, but instead, there was a collective nodding, like a herd of particularly solemn buffalo. It seemed their antics had truly made an impression. As the meeting adjourned, Thal approached Mord with a nod of respect. Thank you, Commander. You've shown us that sometimes the best way forward is through unorthodox means. Just doing my job, Mord replied, resisting the urge to add and making it up as I go along. As they turned to leave, Vex leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. Think they'll listen, Mord shrugged, a lazy grin spreading across his face. Who knows? But I reckon it won't be the last time the galaxy gets a headache because of us. With that, they made their way back to the reckless dreamer, their laughter echoing down the corridors, a sound both defiant and hopeful, a testament to their survival and resilience. For in a universe that loved to throw curveballs and cosmic ironies, they had proven one undeniable truth. Humans might be flawed and irreverent, but they sure as hell knew how to put on a show.